as well. So first of all, welcome everybody, as Lucas said, and just to remind you, on this particular occasion, it's not just a Chiltern Branch event. We've got our friends from East Anglia Branch. So we'll quickly run through the process, particularly relating to what's ahead and the branch information, but it won't take you very long, hopefully. Right, for today, hope to start the presentation in 5 minutes' time. Half an hour talking when the Q&A comes on. This is flexible, of course. It's short form because it's a back to basics subject. This, of course, is our third session in the back to basics, which follows on the successful series we did last year. When you probably don't, most of you probably were aware of that. After about half an hour, we'll call in the Q&A, which will be hosted by Luke and Kane, and then we aim to finish before 2 o'clock. Right, now the next slide. So briefly, some branch information. Some of these slides are just updated ones, which we always see. We are working as a branch to a strategy, which slide's been up before. And we've had meetings to do this, work on this, as you can see in that. The key thing there is an update on our branch future events. We're obviously in session 3, which is today, 27th of July. We've got one coming up in the beginning of August. We've got another one on the 17th. Those are the work environments and the ergonomics, as you can see. There's one on CDM and there's one on accident investigation. Our field trip is in abeyance at the moment for a number of reasons. And of course, we've got Q4, which we haven't changed from the slide previously. Methods of the branch reaching out to reach members. You've seen it all before, which is microsite, YouTube, and principally for our branch, it's LinkedIn. We try and keep LinkedIn up to date because we can get at it and update it immediately. There's no time lag in that. And we also use Twitter and Facebook as well. And the final plea on that front is we're always wanting members. We're always wanting your feedback. And anybody who's interested in that, either put a message through LinkedIn page and also email, which is shown there. Now, moving on to the presentation. That is the home screen for that, and it's just a reminder that it's a joint event with East Anglia, and of course our speaker, I introduce him as and he'll introduce himself still further, as the vice chair of the branch. That's their branch itself. If he wants to say anything about the branch in conjunction with what I've said, it's up to it's open for him to say. But there's his pen picture, Kane, sorry, I got that wrong. Chartered member and he's AI FIRE, and as I say, vice chair, and that's his current work position. When he comes on, he can give you a bit more update of that. I don't need to repeat that. So, and I'm going to close at that because it's over to Kane now. I'm stopping share. So Kane, if you can come on.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you for your kind words on that, Tony. And thank you to Chiltern for hosting today and a collaborative event with the East Anglia Branch. Obviously, as Tony's highlighted, keep your eyes down on the socials for the East Anglia Branch and Chiltern, and we certainly hope to do more collaboration events in the future. Obviously, today's presentation with myself and Luke, we've had a few conversations around the subject matter, and we essentially just want to go to the back to basics and hit some of the key points around fire safety. Obviously, there's a lot of changes in the industry at the moment, all post Grenfell, unfortunately, and yeah, we shall touch base on some of those today. So without further ado, we shall kick off. So fire risk management itself. So what do we plan to cover today? Essentially, why do we need fire? Why do we need to manage fire safety? A little piece around fire science. We'll then go on to talk around passive controls, active controls, a little bit around human factors, touch base on fire risk assessments, and then really what to signpost anyone towards any further reading as well. There's some fantastic organisations out there to get wealth of information from, and it's so prominent now that it's easy to ascertain this information. Engaging with competent persons has never been easier. So yeah, that's a rough idea with the content that we're going to go through. Tony's already highlighted with regards to the housekeeping. Obviously, in the Q&A function, just put in there a question on the chat function, and we can go from there. So with regards to the first slide, so essentially, why do we do fire safety? And it comes down to those three pillars that we have within as health and safety practitioners as well. Luke, do you want to run through the first one, the legal framework?
Yeah, we can go through legal. So as with all health and safety, we've got the legal, financial and moral. Legal, when it comes to fire, lots of acts out there, lots of regulations, but also be sure to check your local area. So the regulations in Scotland are different. We held a branch session with the UAE quite recently. So there's one on there, Fire and Life Safety Code 2022 in UAE. So just make sure you're keeping up to date with those, because there are lots of amendments, and obviously with the Grenfell fire, lots of changes, lots of things that we need to keep an eye out for. So whether that's keeping yourselves up with the IOSH newsletters or British Safety Council or ROSPA, just keeping yourself up to date with everything that's going on out there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And also on that legal piece, that's just worth emphasising the changes that are going to be coming in post Grenfell. I think it's the fire safety regulation, the 2022 amendment, which, if anyone hasn't listened to the podcast of the Grenfell inquiry, there's hundreds of episodes. So as health and safety practitioners, if you're on the road, it's a great podcast to and from work. And it talks about the golden thread, and those changes will be coming into effect in early 2023. But they're primarily focused regarding high-rise residential and sleeping persons. But yeah, that's great, Luke. Obviously, on the financial aspects, just to touch base on the financial. So I've gone to the Fire Protection Association for the data on this, and analysing just under 5,000 fires. Is bring up a mean average loss of just under, over £500,000, just under £700,000, £657,000. So it's a really big financial implication for a lot of organisations, and that's obviously that's not the kind of loss that you can put capex against and one thing and another against. So yeah, having that kind of capital in the back pocket is very unlikely for a lot of organisations. So yes, it's absolutely devastating number there. And the analysis, that figure comes from a combination of private, public sector organisations as well as domestic. And then we move on to the moral side.
Yeah, so when we're looking at financial, if a business goes under, it's going to then, of course, affect the staff as well. So that's going to have a moral implication, not only of direct, deaths or injuries through fire. The moral side of it is, we want to keep people safe, want to keep people well, and those numbers are, although decreasing since 2005, still far too high. It's our sole job as health and safety within the health and safety industry is to keep people from harm, and that's far too many deaths from fire-related fatalities. But yeah, if we have a fire, it affects us financially, but also morally, with people possibly being out of work, out of jobs, the knock-on effects. So we had our first session with Abby, which was looking at the behaviour of injuries at work. That if you have a fire-related fatality in the family, or someone gets injured, it'll affect not only that person but their family. It has a massive knock-on effect. So it's the moral side of it is massive.
And I wrote a number down in my notes as well, Luke, on that, with regards to the number of workers killed last year's, with regards to health and safety events. It was 123 fatalities were recorded by the HSE in work-related incidents. So yeah, it just puts that number into some form of context, that the number of fire deaths is so high still.
It's huge, isn't it, compared with that? Yeah.
And
really puts it in perspective.
We've all seen. I've taken these images out of the media. Obviously, the most prominent one there being Grenfell, with 72 people losing their lives in 2017. But the other three images are all from last weekend. You know, it's absolutely tragic. So, you know, fortunately, you know, multiple fire and rescue services up and down the country calling in major incidents and shouting out for support to their local partners. Yeah, just to put some context to that, so that as a devastating impact. Super.
So we've all seen this before, the triangle. So we've got our 3 items that we need for a fire, and then the chemical reaction to the oxygen, the heat, the fuel. Take one of those away and you can stop the fire. So whether that's cooling with water, starving with CO2, smothering with foam, or dry powder or halon to have that chemical interference. So you need all of those to start a fire. You need a lot of those, a lot of everything there to have a good fire, which is what we saw at the weekend. We had a lot of fuel, a lot of oxygen, and a hell of a lot of heat. So yeah, and it's a bad triangle to have, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And just moving that on to the classifications of fire, we have these classifications are ordinarily used. So for wood would be our carbonaceous, our woods, paper, textiles. B would be your flammable solvents. Don't be hydrocarbons. C's would be your gases. D's involve metal fires, electrical fires for E, and then F being cooking fats. But you can see on the side of a fire extinguisher, you need to use the right media against the right type of fire. Using the wrong media can have devastating consequences. And this is ordinarily the little. Sorry, Luke, I cut across you then.
Oh no, you go. You go.
That's right. Yeah, just to say that ordinarily you'll see this is a really good little aid memoir, just to highlight the fact that you can see the compatibility between the type of incident that you're presented with versus the firefighting media. And within the risk assessments, you really should be considering, okay, what's the hazard in this area? Am I talking about is it a forklift truck that's in the middle of a warehouse? Therefore, I want to use a firefighting extinguisher. Have I got a lot of carbonaceous material and there's really no solvents? So you want to choose your extinguisher and really consider the human factor in that when an incident does occur, someone automatically will be going to the right extinguisher, rather than the human factor of a fight and flight situation. They'll pick up the extinguisher, it could be the wrong one, and then for example, if you put water onto a fuel fire, you're certainly not gonna support that fire ending.
You're gonna want the those labels being on the fire extinguishers as well when you're there. If you've got a couple of different types in the room, you're not going to want you're going to want to have something that's nice and clear for people. So if they are in that fire situation and they feel confident that they can do that, or they've been trained to do that, that they're going to be able to get the right one and make that right decision, because it can obviously be made a lot worse by picking up the wrong one and using it.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the next one, I've just included the stages of fire development. So that'd be the first stage is already when the reaction is building some level of pyrolysis, and the reaction's actually building energy. And then we get to a period where We then have an ignition stage where there's sufficient reaction that it then produces an exothermic reaction. So the fire will then start growing, start developing. It'll be sourcing on other fuels, using up the oxygen in the room or in the local environment. And then through that growth phase, it'll then plateau, and then depending on obviously depending on the environment and the what fuel sources it's got available, how much oxygen it's got available, it'll then sit in that plateau period. People talk about backdrafts and flashovers. It's not for the context of today's conversation, but depending on what type of fire environment you have, compartmentation, that'll plateau out, and then we'll get into the decay. Ordinarily, from a firefighting portable firefighter extinguisher, ordinarily you can only tackle that within the ignition and growth phase. Ordinarily, if it's gone beyond that, you're not going to be able to tackle that with a fire extinguisher. You're going to have 60 to 90 seconds of firefighting media, and that's certainly not going to be enough to be able to fight any level of fire that's gone past that growing phase.
So then we've got our methods of heat transfer. So we've got the 4 different types. So we've got conduction, where the fire is spreading through direct contact between materials. So it heats up a material, it's like a good conductor, like metal, and it comes into contact with a combustible material. And that's how it can travel further across rooms, across buildings, in that manner. So that's where you're fire stopping and trying to keep it in one room. If you do have a fire, that's where that comes into play there. Radiation fires can spread it goes through electromagnetic waves in the air. So the heat can travel in all directions. And when it reaches a combustible material, so that's when you can see from one side of the room, something else over a completely other side of the room will start to burn because it radiates the heat between the two. So it gives that effect of it jumping. Convection fires, most common, and can be some of the most dangerous, where it rises through an office and the heat's trapped in the ceiling and begins to travel horizontally through materials in the room and ignite and further fuel the fire. And then direct contact, so moving along. As we saw last week with the fields burning and it just moving along to the houses, just directly contacting everything, moving that fire along and continuously fueling it.
Yeah, it's a really devastating example of that direct burning, isn't it? Where you see fence panels, the fence panel then licks onto the side of the property, then breaks into a window, say then gets hold of a net curtain in the domestic property. Yeah, that was truly devastating last week to see that in the media. So just to touch base on the top causes of fire, so they're broken down into three sections. Ordinarily through accidental fires. Accidental fires are in that you have maybe a hot work permit process, not being mindful of what's going on behind. You could actually refer to that as a carelessness one as well. But accidental fires, if you've got hot works, embers are falling down the side of a building. There's some old laughing plaster down the side of the property. Yeah, that could be classed as an accidental fire. Carelessness actions, thinking of an example for that could be if you're in a workshop and you've got grinding operations, the oily rags are in the bin, not closed down properly. And then the final one, you've got defective equipment. So not following a good PPM schedule of ensuring that equipment's correctly maintained and serviced. Real emphasis on that PPM schedule, really. And then moving forward to the sources of fuel.
So the source of fuel, these are things that you've got around probably all your offices, all your sites. They can sit there quite happy as long as you keep them stored correctly. The likes of paper and cardboard, fixtures and fittings, electrical installations, storage and materials. walls and ceilings and linings, flammable chemicals and liquids. Depending on how you store them is the level of risk that you've got that you could have a fire. So we want to keep them apart. So yes, that's all the sources of fuels.
And one of the other points, just try to close out some of the terminology. So people refer to a flashpoint, and obviously most important place to ascertain this information is within your safety data sheets within your environments when you're doing those COSH assessments. Ensure that you're linking back to your safety data sheets, reflecting that within whether that's your COSH assessment, your fire risk assessments. But points in there, some of the terminology that you'll see, maybe a flashpoint. So a flashpoint is the lowest temperature in which a vapor will be sufficient to sustain a flame. Because it's not the substance itself that's combustible. It's the vapors that are emitted from that substance. Another terminology is the auto ignition temperature, referred to sometimes as spontaneous combustion. And then the other two refer to the flammable range. And I've just put a separate slide in here for that, just because it's quite hard to explain if you haven't got this diagram here. So if you had methane, for example, the lower explosive limit of methane is 5% of the volume in air, and the upper explosive limit is 17%. So you have this, and this range is there for all flammable substances, and depending on what that substance is, depending on the vastness of this, of the parameters, if you like. So methane has got a flammable range of between 5 and 17%. 2 seconds, I've lost my presentation. I don't know where that's gone. 2 seconds, there we go. Yeah, so it's between 5 and 17%. And then somewhere in between that is what's referred to as an ideal mixture, which is if anyone's seen the bandbox videos on YouTube or has been involved in any fire safety training, that's always a really good presentation.
So where would they find the information for that, Kane?
That will be sat in the safety data sheets. That'll be sat in the safety data sheets, and ordinarily you would find the upper explosive limit and the lower explosive limits. But yeah, certainly by engaging with your suppliers, and that's all. That information is ordinarily readily available, and that gives you an idea as to how volatile the gas is. If you're dealing with something such as acetylene, I think the flammable range of acetylene is somewhere between 2 and the late 90s. I want to say something like 98%. Don't quote me on that, but it's got a huge flammable range. Equally, you could be working with something that's only got a very fine margin, where it's in that flammable range. So it's that's just something to consider really from when you're when you're going through that likelihood and severity conversation with people involved, all the stakeholders involved in those conversations, for you really to consider. So the next thing just to bring up is the passive versus active controls. So I've broken these down into two actions really.
So we've got our passive controls, which are our fire doors, our compartmentation or fire stopping, fire curtains, fire and smoke dampers. All of these are great examples of passive controls, and it will link in with some of the stuff we're talking about in a second, which is your regular routine maintenance of these. So you can have fire doors, you can have fire curtains, but they need to be regularly maintained. We need to make sure that they're working, they're not propped open, the fire dampers work and activate as they should do, and the compartmentation is fully in place. Always we see the electricians or mechanical engineers or sometimes fire engineers knocking through walls and breaking that compartmentation and then not filling those holes in. So it's something we need to make sure we're routinely monitoring to make sure those passive controls are in place and working.
And then that leads quite nicely onto the active controls. and those active controls are ordinarily, I can't see my notes on that. I've realised I've made that really small. Apologies for that. So we've got active fire alarm systems. These can be both automated or from digital or manual call systems. But you could have your property ones or life critical, so or manual systems. Emergency escape lighting, dry and wet risers, fire suppression and sprinkler systems, and they should also include your F gases for things like server rooms or utility rooms. Smoke ventilation, including automatic vents, fire extinguishers, and then as well as emergency voice communication systems.
So some of those control measures, as we said about the materials, we've got to make sure they're stored correctly. We've got to have a robust PPM schedule, whether it be fire door and fire doors, emergency lighting, making sure that the housekeeping is in a good standard. So we want to make sure that we've got inspections in place, whether it be daily, weekly, monthly, to make sure that our fire exits are in place and they're clear. So there's no boxes up against fire doors or pallets left in fire escape routes. So we've got to have those inspections and those audits in place to make sure that everything that we're putting in place is still working and is still functional and could actually work in the event of a fire.
It all sounds quite low level from that side, doesn't it, Luke? But you still see, certainly within on the media and within the IOSH magazine or so on and so forth, where actually you still see organisations where fire doors are actively locked up or an inspector's gone in, and you do see those prosecutions still coming through. So yes, it's really important that back to basics still, is still so important as getting those fundamental housekeeping and getting your local teams to champion those inspections is imperative. It's crazy it still exists in today's world, really.
Yeah,
it still goes on. And the other piece to move on to is the safety of people in these events. Obviously, it's imperative to ensure that you've got your fire emergency plans. When you are at the point of them making a decision for going for an evacuation, what's the process behind the back of that? What procedures are you put in place? And with that as well, if you're trying to comply to 40, if you are compliant to 14 and 45,001, you have an obligation to ensure that you're testing those processes and to ensure that you'll use that feedback loop, plan, do, check, act. What learners are you taking out of this to make it better in the future, make it more robust? And with that ties in nicely with the human factors aspect. When you instigated the fire evacuation process, did everyone go to the north exit versus actually the nearest exit was the south, but it's behind them, and really consider that within your emergency response plans. And then from the back of that, if there's any training needs, and really capture that all in some form of hot debrief and post-incident analysis to take those learnings forwards. It's also important. It's also important from a multi-agency perspective that when you do have these incidents, Lord forbid, these incidents do occur, that from a fire service perspective, potentially, are the rendezvous points suitable for them? Are they familiar on where the hydrant points are? Was there good access? Ask all these questions. Engage with your local fire authority, and pick up those pieces and put it into effect after post incident, and take those learnings forward.
Yeah, it's quite good to get the fire services involved, isn't it, Kane? To get them to your site or your building and say, this is what we've got. Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And certainly reach out to your local fire and rescue service. Ordinarily, they do what's called 7.2Ds, so they'll come out, do risk analysis visits, and essentially establish, okay, if we do have an incident here, what am I going to be? What analysis are we going to be putting forward? Are we going to go offensive? Are we going to go defensive? Who is ordinarily in the workplace? What's the number of employees?
what's the general working hours, and then looking at the fire loading. So actually, have we got Class A material? Have we got Class B? Is there asbestos? So yeah, that collaborative working with the local fire and rescue service is really important. And also, there's always some really good actions off the back of that. I recently engaged with Sprowston in Norwich, and one of the points the guy said is, okay, where's the isolator for the switchgear? And it was easy enough during the day hours to highlight that. But from the back of that, we said, okay, at the gatehouse within the emergency response plan, let's have all of the transformers identifying to all our various buildings so that we can isolate as required. And those learnings have all come out of a conversation between the health and safety practitioner, the fire service, and the site supervisor. So yeah, it's imperative to take those learnings and to collaborate with those multi-agencies, really. Yeah, definitely.
And then we've got PEEPs, personal emergency evacuation plans. So this is an addition to your standard evacuation plan, where it's going to be more specific to an individual or a group of people, depending on their needs and where they're coming from and how to get them out of the building safely, whether that's to get them to a point of ultimate safety outside of the building to fresh air, or whether it's to a point of relative safety. And that will all be set out in there, and that will be discussed with the person or the group of people as to how that would happen in that situation. And that, just the same as you would do a regular evacuation procedure, this would be gone through as well to make sure that all of that works, and the plans that you put in place do work before. Hopefully you won't have a fire issue, but if you're prepared for it, you can get the people out safely. And then if you've got the fire service involved as well, they'll be able to get in hopefully and minimise the effect of the fire.
Yeah, brilliant. And just to pick up on some further reading, really, this as I've kind of signposted a few times through this conversation, this case of engaging with organisations like the Fire Protection Association, the Building and Engineering Association, the Building and Engineering Services Association, the Institute of Fire Engineers, the Fire Industry Association, and as well as our partners with the IOSH Fire Risk Management Group. There's so much information out there, but ultimately, if you don't feel confident in engaging with some of these subjects, where you think actually, okay, I don't feel confident with this. We've all got our limitations. Ultimately, it's about engaging with our peer groups and engaging with competent persons. And certainly, the Institute of Fire Engineers has got an online register on there, so you can go on to engage with who's accredited fire risk assessors, accredited fire engineers, and that's got all their CPDs available to ensure that you're engaging with the right competent person. And as I've already said as well, the Grenfell Tower Inquiry podcast is a hell of a listen for the wrong reasons. But yeah, it certainly does hit home in respect of that incident. So yeah, add that to your podcast playlist, wherever you get your subscriptions from. Super. That pretty much concludes all the bits. It's Q&A session on that now, Luke. Should I end?
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go through. We've had quite a lot of chat about batteries. So with the increase of battery powered vehicles, FLTs, where's a good sort of, I know some people have put some good information in there, but from you, Kane, where's the best place to get your information on those?
There was some dialogue of late from I think it was from the Fire Protection Association, and I think there's some communication going to be coming out as the best methods of firefighting in these. At the moment, it's a little bit of I think it's still a learning subject at the moment, to be fair. But yeah, I'd certainly engage with the Fire Protection Association, the Institute of Fire Engineers, because they are I've seen from their recent publications talking about battery fires, vehicle fires, and I know that the local fire and rescue services are looking at methodologies of tackling those fires as well. Certainly from I'm a bit of a Formula One freak, so from that perspective of seeing the incident a few weeks ago with the cars involved in the RTCs and the drills that they're actually going through, the first consideration is the car in a safe manner to engage with. You know, is it electrically stable? If I put my hand on this, am I gonna be greeted with bad news? So yeah, I think it's still a little bit fluid at the moment. I don't have a binary black and white answer, unfortunately, on that. But what I would say is engage with, if you have got fleet that's electrical fleet, I know we're all on that sustainability journey, looking more towards that. But yeah, strongly consider that in your fire risk assessment. And Barbara done a good session on impact of EVs as well. Melissa's just put in the chat function. So yeah, we're sure to potentially put a link out for that as well.
This one's quite a specific one. What was the range of carbon monoxide? And then have you ever measured methane levels with a lamp?
No, I've never measured methane levels with a lamp. I'm not sure what that. I'm not a fire engineer at trade. I'm ex-firefighter and fire risk assessments and other health and safety practitioner, but I've never engaged with that, unfortunately, in the past. So yeah, I'm not too sure on the answer to that one. Have you got anything you want to share on that, Luke? I don't know if it's
No. So a lot of people sort of bringing up questions about their local fire brigades and saying that the fire service don't carry out inspections anymore, but asking that how is that the same for everyone in the country?
Yeah, and I sense some of those changes have probably come about since the fire service reform order, which came into effect in 2005, that really took the onus away from the local authority and then put the onus on the organisation. So yeah, I guess if health and safety practitioners have seen that transition from pre those days to where we are today, yeah, that may well feel that way. And from that perspective, you know, that the likelihood is they're focusing on the higher risks. So it may be lower tier, upper tier coma sites. They may have, you know, those strong considerations. If there's any specific risks as far as, you know, like the ZEER environments, for example. But no, I would always recommend to reach out to your local fire and rescue service, and you know, even offer them in for a risk visit as such, to take those learnings, really.
Yeah, they're always very interested to get involved, aren't they? And wanting to get involved. I know our local service to Watford is literally on our same car park, so. Because we print the newspaper, we give them their newspapers, and they always come in with their new recruits and show them around and have a look around. So it's creating that dialogue with them, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely building those relationships.
Yeah, it might not be specific fire visits that they do every year, but yeah, it's opening that dialogue with them and letting them in. Regarding fire stopping, so people have found themselves chasing. People putting holes in place and then having issues. So is it worthwhile agreeing the fire stopping as part of the original task rather than being...
Yeah, most certainly. And you know, looking at putting things like this into your trams packs or your risk assessments and method statements, it should be that journey of in the Grenfell podcast, and if anyone's had the opportunity to read the interim report or the full report, but it talks about the golden thread and that passage of information. So if they're documented within the risk assessments and within the method statements, if there's a transition of ownership, you know, if someone's going to come in afterwards and do the fire stopping afterwards or the compartmentation, your electrician may well do the holes, but they're not going to do the area of making good. There needs to be that communication piece, either with your facilities team or engineers or maintenance teams within your organisations. But yeah, certainly it's certainly worth putting that into the original method statements, if anything, just to put that nudge in there to say, okay, what's the process of making good for this? And that's all risk-based approach on that as well, ultimately, because yes, it's around doing what's reasonably practicable. But if we're talking about sleeping accommodation, or we've got residents, if your premises is in a flat, and we've got, or sorry, is in a lower building, and we've got multiple occupancy homes above, there's a really strong consideration to say, actually, this can't wait until the end of the week. It needs to be done the same day. So on the same job as we make the whole, are we going to get the engineers to make good on the same day? So yeah, I'd say add that into the risk assessments and method statements is helpful. But yeah, keeping that thread of information is also imperative.
And there is one question which just revolves around fire door inspections, about whether we have contractors outside or inside, in-house people doing it. So that would be interested, just because it comes up often on their fire risk assessment documents.
Yeah, it does, and ultimately it depends on what level of competency you've got around you as an organisation. If you've got an in-house facilities team, or or whether you're outsourcing it doesn't really matter. But depending on the competency of those persons, I think it's the Fire Protection Association, I think, do a competent persons fire door inspectors piece, and yeah, it's around being competent, with the distance, with the incandescent strips, ensuring that they're effectively maintained. Is something that you can do in-house, but obviously there needs to be a conscious decision and journey to follow that through, really. But yeah, either outsourcing or in-house are both options available. It's just whatever works for your organisation ultimately.
David Thomas, you got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. Hi. Yes, I was asking a question about mines rescue lamps. Actually, I for 15 years, I think it was, or 12 years, I was involved in mines rescue. So we were taught to measure how to measure gases with a miner's lamp. But more importantly, back to Grenfell, and a question for Kane. As you know, for planning applications, local authorities rely on the fire officer to give advice on the design. Who was the officer? Why has the officer at Kensington and Chelsea, the fire service there, not been named and shamed, who gave the advice to Kensington and Chelsea Borough Council?
Yeah,
I'm still waiting for that. I'm still waiting, and I wonder if that's why the fire service may still be prosecuted for the advice they've given. Yeah,
and obviously it's I don't want to go into the detail of those for the purposes of for litigation ultimately. But yeah, I don't know is the short answer from that, David.
It's a valid question that I think will be asked in the inquiry, one would hope.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. I think a lot of questions are going to be asked, David, aren't they? So,
yeah, I just kept it rather general like that, because it's been, we had all this from day one about how the fire service are heroes for those on the day, and no one questioned that. And then again, back to the political dynamics, which really upsets me. Then when they started asking the question, well, who did this and who did that advice? All of a sudden, people disappeared, didn't they? We had these, especially for the manufacturers as well, who obviously don't want to give evidence unless they sort of are cleared. So it's quite worrying. I want to pick up as well something you said earlier, because for evacuation of people, you should evacuate people to an absolute point of safety, not a relative.
You want to get people out of the building, don't you, David?
Get them out. And I know the fire service when I was dealing with Bucks Fire and Rescue, were adamant with that. And I know on at least one occasion they took great pleasure in monitoring one organisation who thought all they had to do was get people to a relative place of safety, and the fire service would then evacuate them. And they were horrified when they realised that wasn't the case. The fire people are there to put the fire out. We didn't quite understand that.
No, they want to come to a building where everyone's out, and they know that everyone's out and safe.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay. We got one last question, which is: do you need to have a qualification to carry out fire risk assessment for a business?
Mm-hmm. You need to be competent. Ultimately, you need to be competent to make that conscious decision. I would strongly recommend engaging with some of those organisations that I highlighted. Certainly, I'm aware that there's multiple choices out there. Your BBC statement, other things are available here, but certainly it depends on the level of risk that you're dealing with. But ultimately, there are qualifications out there to ensure that you're competent to deal with those fire risk assessments. But yeah, certainly from the Fire Protection Association, they deliver some really comprehensive courses, as do other organisations. So yeah, do your research on that. Make sure that fits the risk profile for what you're working with.
Yeah, Alan, did you want to quickly jump in before we close?
I think he's on a mobile there.
Oh, he's on mute.
He hasn't made it easy for himself, Alan.
You're on mute, Alan. Your microphone's on mute.
Oh, you're on mute, buddy.
Still on mute.
It's not mute.
Oh, we like to hear him.
I'm here.
Yeah, you're there.
There we are, Mr. Klom.
Yeah, working from small screen today. It was really an observation. Great approach, guys. The sort of conversational and the way you bounced off each other. So congratulations for that. I would just doing my usual, raising my hand for farms and farm safety. This time of year, you mentioned the grass fires. Well, this is the time of year when £500,000 combine harvesters regularly go up in smoke, much to the despair of insurers. And that's due to a build-up of, debris and waste. And the same goes for mowers, robot mowers, £40,000 a piece. They tend to go up in flames. So, just think about that. I did have a conversation with a company that install fire detection and suppression systems for mobile machinery. So I did put in the chat that might be something for B2B3. We can follow that one up sometime. An interesting session. And then just linking it on the farm side with the devastating losses, livestock. You've got thousands of chickens, pigs, etc. in these huge fires, and they do happen with regularly, and I think it's an important thing to think about there. It's not just people. You've got to think how you handle horses, for example, in stables, equine establishments that are going crazy. You've got to have a way of handling those safely. So yeah, you've got to think outside the box, or the horse box in that case. Anyway, no more puns. I'll finish it there, and thank you again.
Thank you, Alan.
Cheers, Alan. Thank you very much. We'll
Right.
call it there, shall we, Kane? We can hand back to Tony.
Screen, and is anybody else? I mean, is there anything from East Anglia at this stage?
No, thank you. Thank you for Chiltern for hosting today. Great to do a collaboration event. Obviously getting out to as many members as possible. So yeah, thank you for the kind words from everyone. We're all health and safety practitioners at heart. We all need to refresh our CPD at times. It's a really refreshing task for myself just to go through this. Talk about myself and Luke. Talk about active and passive stuff again. We're like, okay. There's a couple of actions for me to implement as well. So I'm going, okay, actually, are the evac chairs on part of the PPM? Who looks after those? So yeah, it's really refreshing for all of us to go through that. And nothing really to add from that side, Tony. Just a massive thank you again from East Anglia Branch, and keep your eyes on the socials for the next events.
Fine, okay. What we didn't actually discuss is your career, seeing your ex-forces.
Background, ex-military, brief bit of time with the prison service, then some time with the fire service, and then moving on to upper tier coma site. And then I moved into the world of health and safety practitioner with Crone as an organisation, and present on the health and safety manager with Anglian Home Improvements. So yeah, quite a diverse portfolio, and it's a really exciting career and a wonderful peer group that we've got around us as health and safety practitioners.
Yeah, well, good to hear that. You're obviously an expert at fire and windows at the moment.
I tried to leave that to the build and safety team. So, absolutely.
Right. Anything else needs to be said? Sorry, Melissa, do you want to say something?
Yeah, hi. So no, I saw Stephen's hand was up. I didn't know if he had a question.
Oh, I didn't spot that.
Yeah, so
He's lowered it.
yeah, he's lowered it. So I don't know if he's still on, if he wanted to come on. Stephen? Yeah, his hand is raised.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Sorry. Hi there. I just had a bit of trouble joining earlier on, but it did eventually connect. Will it be on recorded as it often is in the past? The session. Okay. I mean, I did catch a lot of it, but there was a bit at the beginning I'm afraid I did miss. So it's
and the overheads will be there anyway.
Lovely. That's great. All right. Sorry to throw that in at this late stage, but thank you. What I did see was very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, so just with that, I had posted a reminder of the LinkedIn page. If you're not following us at present, you can follow us on LinkedIn. That's where you can get the updates on the recordings and the presentations and upcoming events. We also do have the microsite. We keep that updated as well. But I know LinkedIn is where you can get, the information much readily. So I just wanted to say on behalf of Chiltern.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. On behalf of Chiltern Branch, thanks again to Tony, Kane, and Luke for this session. It's the third of our 8-part series, and special thanks to Luke for coordinating and planning this year's summer school series. So hope everyone enjoyed it, and again, we want to continue to provide really good content. So if anyone has any comments or questions, any other suggestions for upcoming branch meetings, do drop us a line, as Tony has mentioned in the slide pack he showed.
Even back to basics 3. What do you want? I see Alan's nodding his head, and he's got.
Okay, great job, everyone. Thanks, Tony, for hosting.
Okay, well, if that's it, I will end the meeting. So see you all, folks. I'm ending it right now. Bye.
Thanks, Kane.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.